Shelley Walden's novel, On the Sunbeam, notably takes the genres of science fiction and coming of age and blends them together in an emotional, powerful story. The novel follows Mia and tells her journey from her life as a student to her job as a crewmate to an adventure into deep space in hopes to reunite with an old friend. In this presentation, I'll be examining how the novel approaches the theme of growth, mostly on understanding one's responsibility and capability. I'll also be examining specific panels from the novel that I chose, which I think best represents Mia's development from being a rambunctious kid to a mature individual. In Chapter 13, Mia reveals to Jules how she ended up joining Alma's crew after moving on from Cleary's. She recounts having a conversation with her teacher, Miss Martinez. During their conversation, Miss Martinez reminds Mia of how they first met. She first encounters Mia walking around the hallways of the school. Mia's immaturity in this moment of Chapter 13 is represented by her tendency to wander around. This leads up to a specific moment in the chapter that reveals an important part in understanding Mia's character. Within these panels, Miss Martinez says to Mia, "I saw so much strength in you, so much courage." The quote implies that Mia does have the capability of reaching her fullest potential, but she was too immature. This quote also foreshadows Mia's struggle with responsibility and maturity throughout her time as a student and onward as the novel progresses. As previously said, Mia's wandering represents her immaturity. This tendency to wander is something the reader sees happen often with Mia in the first half of the novel, such as Mia skipping assembly in Chapter 1. It is important to note that Mia wandering around does not only happen in the past, but it happens in the present as well, when she trespasses into a taped-off area in Chapter 4. The incident in Chapter 4 and the consequences that happen as a result can be read as Mia's continued struggle from controlling her immaturity as a young adult. There is a significant quote in Chapter 9 that suggests the novel's underlying concept of understanding your own responsibility and maturity. Before this, Char has been suspended from her position as captain due to Mia's incident in Chapter 4. Jules then invites Mia to drink with her. She questions the stupidity of adults and states how people forget they can change things when they are older. Jules's quote references sledgehammer money and using a sledgehammer to break the room. This represents the idea that adults significantly have more power than children. She knows that an adult's actions can shape and influence the circumstances that surround them. Understanding that there's a huge responsibility in how one's actions hold the power of change is significant to being a mature person. This concept eventually plays into how Mia deals with conflict in the final act of the novel. The next moment in the text I want to highlight appears in Chapter 17, which happens much later after Mia and the crew arrive in the staircase. Prior to this moment, Elliot encourages Mia to go off and find Grace, since reuniting with her was the reason for the trip to the staircase. Mia eventually sees Jane and approaches her, and tells Jane she wants to see Grace. Within this group of panels, we see a particular panel with a bright red background, featuring Mia shouting at Jane, which brings us back to the past. I interpret that one singular panel to Mia's past not as a symbol of Mia's anger towards Jane, but rather it is a comparison between Mia's behavior in the past to Mia's behavior in the present. Jane's presence reminds Mia of the day that Grace leaves the school. However, unlike her past self, Mia does not lash out at Jane when she sees her. Instead, Mia understands the circumstances that led her to this moment and handles this moment very responsibly. The manner in which Mia deals with Jane is a sign that she is a more responsible person now than she was in the past. On the Sunbeam centers itself on Mia's life from being a student to a crewmate going on a grand adventure to reunite with her friend Grace. But it also centers itself on another journey of Mia's, a journey of growing into a mature person with a newfound understanding of personal responsibility.